Welcome to the Cognitive Rampage podcast. Hope you're taking care of you. I'm definitely doing that. And the person that's on the podcast today is definitely trying to help people do that. Everyone knows I am deeply involved in mental health. That's what I write about. That basically where my activism is as well. So when I see and find people like Julia Rucklidge or Dr. Julia Rucklidge that's here, writing and blogging and making a movement, if you will, while also doing the research on top of just writing about it, spreading the news and activist wise, but bringing attention to the idea of treating mental health with a nutritional aspect and mainly with minerals, right? She focuses more in that area. But when I see a natural way, if you will, to treat what we see as mental illness, et cetera, now, whether we're going to call them diagnosis, et cetera, I become interested because I am anti-chemical incarceration. You all know that. And I just got intrigued. So when I saw that, I had to sign in, and I could give you a long list of a lot of places where she writes, where she blogs, where she spreads this message. But the mental health and nutrition group on Facebook is where I found her and her work, and where I would suggest you go to as well. But read it all. Read it all. There's another website. It was mad about. Oh, she will.
Mad in America?
That is it. Mad in America there were some interesting articles in there I liked. But welcome to the show, Dr. Julia Rucklidge. Thank you for getting through our mental health test before we came live.
Absolutely. No, it's my pleasure. Always my pleasure to talk about our work.
Well, where I saw you've been everywhere. I see a lot of focus on ADHD and anxiety, and almost as if you're trying to get rid of the Adderall inclusion, if you're trying to find another way. Can you first tell me what made you start looking outside of the pharmaceutical approach?
Sure. It's a combination of things. I'm a trained clinical psychologist. And so I learned in my training in the 1990s that diet and nutrition actually were of trivial significance in the treatment of mental illness, and that only drugs and psychotherapy can treat these serious conditions. So I got that type of training, which is what most people probably also get, is that sort of, the conventional way forward of treating mental illness. But it really wasn't long into my career that I came to the conclusion, based on my research and based on the research of other people and reading and just being open. I think that's been the number one thing as a scientist, is just to be open to weird alternative ideas that don't immediately sound a bit too far left, way out there, but to be open to it. But it wasn't long that I came to conclusion that what we're doing is simply not good enough. Even though we're telling everyone that we're doing a great job, we've got these great medications, they're fantastic, they're curing people, they're making people well. If we're really honest about the data, it's not great. And so, so around the same time, I heard about some families in southern Alberta, Canada, who were treating themselves with nutrients. And so, and they were people who had serious mental illness. They had bipolar disorder. They had psychosis. And I heard about these families from my PhD supervisor, Professor Bonnie Kaplan, who I worked with her from 1993 to 1998. Around the time when I was doing my PhD, she heard from these families, and they said to her, "We have an idea, and we think it's making a huge difference for people with mental illness." I mean, initially she completely ignored them. She said, "No, that's just that's yet another example of snake oil." But she decided to, after a while of hearing about data, about hearing about families and people getting better, she ran some preliminary trials in the in the late 1990s, published in the earlier part of this century. So I have great respect for Bonnie Kaplan, and I decided to try the nutrients here in New Zealand. Just give it a go. It didn't seem, it seems a logical thing for a scientist to do is to study an idea, no matter how much it contravenes current conventional ways of thinking. And so I embarked on this area, changed my career completely about a decade ago, and haven't looked back. And this is all we do. We run clinical trials using vitamins and minerals to see whether or not they can have an impact on a variety of different mental illnesses. Does that answer your question?
That and then some. The cognitive rampage already came out of you in the very beginning, and that's opening. For me, I got out of treating people because I saw a lot of the chemical approach, the pill approach, when there were other ways. But you said it best, and I can even tell, like, your background, right? There's nothing behind you that says you're marketing something, right? That you're running this product, right?
Yeah.
I see a scientist is what is in front of me. So
Yeah.
so the idea that you are really adhering to what the definition and the foundation of what that means, not what some social construct or better fiscal plan possibly could even continue to make for you, that you really stuck to what it is that you set out to do.
Exactly. And so I just commenting on the not having a background in the industry, we do not ever accept any money to run our studies and from anyone in the industry. So the companies the companies that make the nutrients that we study, we do not have any financial affiliation with them. They don't tell us what to do. They don't ever see the data until it's published. So they have no idea what we find until it's actually out there. And it's a fantastic relationship to have with companies when they agree to that process. And not a lot of companies will do that. So some people will say, well, why don't you change companies? Well, the part of it is that I have yet to find another company that operates the same way as the companies that I've been working with in Canada. So, but it's a great relationship in that they provide us with the nutrients and matching placebo for free, but that's it. And we're allowed to do whatever we want here. So it's a fantastic independence from the industry that doesn't exist in the pharmaceutical industry. And we felt that it was so important in order for us to be taken seriously that had to be at the forefront. So, and this was a decision, actually this was Bonnie Kaplan was the one who took that stance, and I followed her. And it's been a really important stance because the number of times I've been criticized or accused of taking money from companies when I can say, you check it out, come and look at our finances, completely clean. So we're doing this work because we think it's important. We think it's important to put research to this idea that we do the types of trials where people will have to pay attention, and that's what we do. There's no money in. I don't own shares. There's no money in it for me. I have a job. It keeps me. It gives me a living, but I'm not getting rich on this.
And that's important. I'm just going to sum it up because I'll say it. You mean it's not American science research? That's what you're telling me, is that it's bought and paid for to skew the results that we need to, so we can say it cures 7 out of 10 people, or it doesn't, right?
It's not bought. That's right, and it's not paid for. And we're upfront, honest. We tell it as it is. So whatever we find, that's what we report.
I'm backpedaling now because I threw it out there all stiff, but there's some American science that get down. Now, I love that you have to clarify that, because the truth is, the way science, I know a lot of listeners and fans of what we do really kind of look left of science sometimes, because you never really know what to trust, right? Because until you go down the rabbit hole of what core company donated to what politics, it can get crazy. So, yeah. We've talked how even science sometimes is beginning to be looked by, but I'm still kind of in awe, really, Julia, of how someone that is a scientist stayed the scientist and really said, look, why wouldn't you study it? Because if truly the foundation of what we do is questioning each other's theories for a nonstop search, how can we stop searching and say, that's it, it's the pills, we're good? How can we do that?
Well, exactly. What surprised me early on in this research was that I came into this very naively. I didn't know a lot about using vitamins and minerals. It wasn't in my training. I've learned it all on the job. But what surprised me very early on was that I saw this as being a no-brainer, because people buy supplements all the time, and they believe in them, but there's not actually a lot of research to support them either way. And so here I thought, well, what's the harm in either determining that they don't work or determining that they do work? Either way, the outcome doesn't matter. We provide some information for the public in order to make some good decisions about their health. But I was stopped very early on in doing this work, and that's what stunned me, because I couldn't understand why there was an opposition for me to even get going in this work. So it took a couple of years to even get this stuff off the ground, because we were stopped by, granting agencies just don't want to have anything to do with supporting this in the early days. And ethics committees were putting up every obstacle that they could come up with in order to prevent us from doing this type of work. And it did. I didn't know the politics of it. I'm far more familiar with it now, but at the time I just couldn't understand what was the problem.
So was this a political pushback? Was it all across the board? And how many years ago? You said 2 or 3 years ago getting into this. How long ago was it?
No, 2006. I was my first contact with the boards that make decisions around these types of clinical trials, and making that first contact. But our first publication was a case study, and that wasn't until 2009.
Okay, because I was going to ask, what was the first study, or what brought you in as you walked into it unknowingly as a scientist trying to be unbiased as possible? And what was the first kind of study that made you go, oh, this is something here? I'm sure it was from Kaplan, Dr. Kaplan, etc. What did you notice?
Yeah.
What did you see? What was the first one?
Well, I think there's when you read something like Bonnie's work, and her first publications was what we call a case series, which is a number of people who had bipolar disorder who were put on the nutrients, and they found that it benefited them, huge reduction in their symptoms of mania, depression, and psychosis, with a simultaneous reduction in the use of medication. So it is a remarkable first study. And it's the type of study that everyone should pay attention to, because people got so much better when the conventional treatment hadn't helped them. And from a sort of a theoretical perspective, it was, that I was intrigued. Of course you're intrigued, but it's not until you see someone get well that you really get a buy-in. And so you can hear these things that are happening overseas. You can hear that people are getting better, but until you see someone clinically get better on nutrients, that's when I can't turn back. And so when I have seen people get so much better on nutrients, where I have either treated them with psychological therapies and they haven't benefited, or I know that they've been on a history of different medications and that's had absolutely no impact on their symptoms, and they walk into one of our studies and they're coming back to us 2 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks later and saying, my symptoms are gone. You have to pay attention to that. And that's why we keep going, is the stories of people's lives being completely turned around by the use of just nutrients. We've had kids who, we currently are just finishing a randomized control trial using nutrients for the treatment of ADHD in children. And we, when you've got a child who can't, we had one kid come in who had been expelled from school. He'd been on Ritalin. Ritalin had caused him serious cardiac arrhythmias. He was at the end of the road in terms of what conventional treatment can offer him. And, he was being homeschooled by his parents. They don't make a lot of money. They were unable to continue to work. So a really desperate case. And he came in here we put him into the trial. And they all families do get an opportunity to try the nutrients as part of the trial, although there is a placebo phase. So when he's definitely on we knew he was definitely on the nutrients. This kid life turned around, and so that was about 2 years ago now. And he's now in a school. He's got friends. He's performing where he should be academically. So, and his parents have said, we thought that we were going to have to deal with him as a disability forever, and that they could see the trajectory of going on to crime and all of those things that can happen to these types of children, and now they feel a lot more confident that he has a positive future. So it's cases like that I keep going, and people who email me every day from all over the world who tell me about stories of getting well on nutrients. You can't ignore it, and our data support it. And we've published randomized controlled trial with adults with ADHD, where we showed nutrients were better than placebo. You can't ignore that. You cannot continue. People would love to continue to say this is entirely a placebo effect. Well, they can't do that because the data say otherwise.
Oh, well, it's breaking down barriers, Julia. What can we walk into the nutrients now? I'm novice here, so please walk slow. As I'm sure you could cognitively rampage down the steps and structures of these nutrients. But maybe we keep it simple for me in lesson 1, at least today. And, broadly kind of, what are the nutrients? And I know they vary based on who you're treating. I got to assume. So
No. No,
Here comes my
no.
education. Here it comes. Come on, give it to me.
Okay, so no, it's a simple, it's a broad. The nutrients that we've been studying are the ones that were developed in Alberta, Canada, by these families who were treating themselves with nutrients. They put together a broad spectrum of nutrients. So by all your vitamins, your B vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin D, E. And then all of the minerals very well chelated. Okay, so that means that they're well absorbed, but across the board. So it's got the formula has changed over time, but it's between 36 to 42 active ingredients. So everyone gets the same thing in our trials. We don't individualize treatment at all. The only thing that we might do is change the dose a little bit. So most people come in taking, at their new dose would be about nine pills a day for our kids, but we may decide to increase that dose because 9 may not be enough. So we may go up to the full dose for treatment of mental illness is 12 pills a day. So that's the sort of the target dose, but we may work within there and that dose may go up and down, but they're all getting the same nutrients. So it is a shotgun approach. It's not what a lot of people practice out there. If you were to see a naturopath, you would end up being in, they'd probably look at, they do blood tests, they might do genetic testing, they might do urine testing, and they'll say, well, you need a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So they might say you need some B12 and some methylfolate or some zinc, B6, et cetera. And they'll put together a combination of things that they feel is personalized to you. Whereas we don't do that. We simply say, let's give everyone the same thing. What you don't need, you'll get rid of. And the things that you do need, you'll use. Our bodies have evolved to be able to excrete minerals and vitamins. They haven't evolved to deal with things like Prozac or Ritalin. But we definitely know how to get rid of B12 if you don't need any more of it. Yeah, so that's our approach.
Yeah, I working in the clinics, rehab clinics, the multiple pills, it was a known common theme that there were a lot of stomach issues. So in your group, when you would have a guy or a girl have to run out, or they were keeled over kind of all day, they had stomach issues. A lot of people that were taking the psychotropic medications like that were really dealing with that. And now, since you were talking how the body's meant to process that, just 12 pills a day, I kind of was like, wow, that's a lot. Does that mean that we're technically that deficient across the board and we need it that much? Or is that just that many we need to be putting in to have that shotgun approach?
Right. We don't know. That does seem to be the dose that works for people with mental illness. So the regular person on the street who has no mental health issues, no physical health issues, probably doesn't need 12 pills a day. But we're dealing with the vulnerable people in the population who, and I don't want to give the impression that nutrition and nutrients is the only way to treat mental illness. And of course, there are other factors out there that contribute to the expression of mental illness. So, but for some people with mental illness, is it possible that they've inherited many genetic differences that mean that they don't metabolize things as well as someone else, and that they need more nutrients than what they may get out of a typical diet? So that's why we're working at that level of giving so many nutrients. Now, one of the reasons why it's 12 is that it's got so many minerals in it. And so the minerals themselves, when they're well chelated, are very bulky. And so that contributes to that. When you think of people will often think of a 1 a day, and they'll look at the ingredients, and sure, there are minerals in there, but the mineral dose is tiny compared to what we probably need. And so we take these 1 a days in order to essentially prevent a nutritional deficiency. So they might help you stop getting scurvy, but they do not provide the amount of nutrients that's optimal for brain health. That's simply never been considered when we come up with recommended dietary allowances, the RDA.
Man, so I love this. I mean, the fact that it still kind of feels, even though it's 10 years in its study and research with some older research, I mean, for the practice itself, it's new, it's cutting edge, it's pushing that edge. And I mean, even if it saves 10 people out of a 20-person study, it's worth looking into, because you can barely say that with any kind of bipolar psychotropic treatment. I mean, there's some psychiatrists I've met that call, I forget the combination, call it the silver bullet for bipolar. I think it was lithium and something else. I can't remember, but I've worked with a few of them in my time, and all of them have a different kind of silver bullet combination thing, for treating specifically bipolar. ADHD is really up to what, 2 or 3 now, pretty much is what you focus on. But those can do a lot of internal damage. They do a lot of long-term damage. Some side effects people aren't even really used to, or maybe even know comes out. I've seen people get in a lot of trouble down those lines. But is there any internal damage by ingesting the minerals in that fashion, or any kind of?
Yeah. I mean, that's partially an unknown, but we collect data on side effects, and we also collect data on safety. So we send all of our participants for blood testing before and after exposure to the nutrients. And so at this stage, I can confidently say that nothing's come up there. In fact, I can even say, based on our RCT, the randomized control trial that we published a couple of years ago, there were no group differences between those who were on placebo and those who were taking the nutrients. So both groups reported things like headaches and stomach aches. You'd expect that because you're asking people to monitor these symptoms, so they'll tell you about it. But there was no more reporting in the micronutrient group of those types of problems compared to the placebo. So that means that actually there are no side effects associated with taking the micronutrients. I know that's hard to believe, but the side effects that have come up that we thought were side effects associated with taking the nutrients may not have to do with the nutrients. It's just the ingestion of pills that may create some gastrointestinal problems or headaches. Even then, when people do report these symptoms to us, they're usually gone within about 2 to 4 weeks. As long as they take them with food and water, we don't have problems. One of the best ways of determining that you're not having massive numbers of side effects in a trial is to look at the number of dropouts in your trial. So we have very few dropouts in the ADHD study. The one that we're just about to complete with children with ADHD, we've had 93 children go through that study with 3 dropouts. That's tiny. If you look at drug trials, you'll have up to 30% of people dropping out. And they'll be probably dropping out for a number of different reasons. But probably the 2 top things will be that it's not working or they can't tolerate the side effects. And so the fact that we're able to retain so many people in our trial actually speaks to the fact that this is not causing a lot of problems.
Well, can I add something else you may want to add to that? Is the fact that you only had 3 ADHD diagnosed people drop out of a long-term study.
Yeah, I know. Oh, I know. And we had a trial, the pilot trial that was published last year, it was a PhD of a Heather Gordon was a PhD student of mine, and she published a trial with 14 children with ADHD. Those 14 children went through a trial where they were on the nutrients for 8 weeks. They came off the nutrients for 4 weeks. We put them back on the nutrients for 8 weeks, and then they came off the nutrients for 4 weeks, and then we followed them up for 6 months. And our retention up to the sort of the end point of the trial was 100%. Whoa. All of those children stayed in that trial. And at follow-up, we managed to get 13 out of 14 of those kids followed up. So that's a pretty impressive number of children being able to stick to this study.
Yeah, especially. Yeah. Can I ask, do you manage during the trials there, do you manage the food, the diet, the nutrients?
No. Yeah, no, we don't. And it's not that I don't think diet is important. It's simply that when you're doing these types of studies, you can't be manipulating too many variables. And so if you are manipulating their diet and you're giving them nutrients, then you don't know why they get better. And so you've got to do, if you were going to manipulate diet, then you'd want to have that as a proper arm where you had people randomized to a diet manipulation versus nutrients versus placebo, some type of design like that. And that's actually really, really hard to do. We do collect data on their diet, and to date, we've looked at that as sort of a variable to make sure that randomization has been successful and that people can't say that, well, one group was just better fed than the other group, or that, maybe this group had more deficiencies than the other group. And we can confidently say that is not playing the role of why people are getting better. So we collect that data in order to ensure that any of the criticisms that come our way, and there are many of them, and this is one of them, that we can just say, no, this has got nothing to do with their the diet that they came into the study with. Obviously, our studies prove a point, and that is that whatever it is that these people are eating, it's not adequately meeting their nutritional requirements. And whether or not it's because they're eating the crap Western diet, which I can't say is true of a lot of these families. These are families who care about their kids. So it could be that even though they may be eating well, the nutrients that are being provided in their food, for whatever reason, is it the way we remineralize the soil? Is it got to do with how we, the types of foods that we select for eating? Is it got to do with the use of glyphosate? All types of other things will compromise the quality of the nutrients in our food. So even if you're eating well, for some people, it may not be adequate for your brain health. So we are proving that point, but with our research. So it's not that I think we should just be supplementing the whole world. I think we need to be seriously considering the quality of the food that we're eating.
I love it. Yes. The fact that you don't do that, well, that could, I don't know if causation is not causality, but the idea that they're having regular old stomach ache and headaches, that could lead to their diet of up and down of regular, not the minerals that they're taking. So I'm kind of backing up your point that, the side effects are almost null and void, especially the fact that you're not manipulating the diet, that it is just randomization. That leaves it open to really influence. But it's really the front lines of this. So really digging out any data out of this is not antiquated. Any of this could be helpful in any long-term study, short-term. So as it just feels like you're kind of just digging the trench right now, and you're flinging back all this information. Like, all right, this is where we're at so far. This is what we've discovered. I had a gentleman on, Dr. Jack Cruz, actually talks a lot about circadian light, blue light, reduction in electrons in our energies of life, etc. But it's also linking some to food because it grows that way. I am novice there. I'm learning. I'm diving down that rabbit hole at the same time. But like you, he's a neurosurgeon, not like you, but meaning deep in his field of study, and was not taught these things, and then saw it and used it on himself, changed his life, and then had to study it. He's like, I couldn't ignore it. And so he's seeing signs of blue light being bad, but etc. It goes deep. So, but it's the worth is the study, and seeing any kind of response that changes how people treat themselves or how we look forward. Especially, I want to make sure I keep diluting it, but those that are dealing with mental health, because what you're dealing with aren't the so-called, we're trying to pick people off the street to keep them random. You're focusing on those that are dealing with mental health diagnosis.
Absolutely. We are definitely addressing that part of the population. And so we don't know whether or not we're not targeting well people. So this is not research that the well person necessarily needs to apply to themselves. Although, having said that, we have done studies following the earthquakes here in Christchurch where people were really stressed, and we gave them nutrients, and we found that they helped them recover from earthquakes. And then that study was replicated after a flood in Alberta, Canada in 2013. So we've got data that says that if you're really stressed, then taking good B vitamins alongside some solid minerals is a good idea, because you'll probably recover more quickly. And who doesn't have stress? So, so there's a great body of literature there that does show that taking at least the B vitamins, if you're experiencing acute stress, is a good idea.
Yeah, I've heard that a few times. The epigenetic influence is there, the stress, the environment, what we go through. How we know if or how much it directly affects our body can be studied on various levels. But just at the cusp of what you're learning by the mineral replacements. I'm for anything eliminating chemical incarceration or the use of heavier use narcotics of any kind. And I've seen them fail, and I've seen them help for a little bit. And frankly, I think there's a million other ways to try, but I think before you start walking down that road. And this is one that needs to be, tried, experienced, and needs to be funded. People need to experience and share. And this is forefront stuff, Julia.
Well, I mean, that's what we think. So I would never, I'd hate to say eliminate medications entirely. And you also said, yeah, they can help some people. What we would like to have happen is that people could realize that if they're feeling really unwell mentally, that you don't go immediately to a prescription, and that you try other things first that we know are less harmful and don't carry the same side effect and long-term risks that medications do. So try a change in lifestyle, try exercising, try changing your diet, try additional nutrients if required, try psychological treatments, and then save medications for when these approaches don't work. If our community and our society could change to a point where medications was not the frontline form of treatment, I think we could be going a long way. But at the moment, unfortunately, it's what's funded, at least in this country, is medications. And it's, you can tell that it's the frontline form of treatment because 1 in 8 New Zealanders are currently on an antidepressant. It's really concerning, especially because over the last couple of years, there have been studies that are coming out that are suggesting that they're not as good as we think they are. And that a lot of unfortunately, a lot of the studies are corrupt. There's a lot of problems there. A lot of the negative trials aren't published, so we don't actually know how effective they really are anyway. And then there's studies that are showing that they're probably not as good. They're just, that we're not making a dent or changing recovery rates or relapse rates from depression despite the use of medications. There are studies that are showing that. So it's very concerning that this is where we've gotten to as a society, and it's partially the influence of big pharma and the powers it holds.
Yeah, I gotta imagine in the early 2006 that you had to face some serious opposition versus that magic pill society. I mean, we live in that age.
Yeah, we continue to face. I mean, that was the beginning, but we've faced problems all along the way. This has not been an easy road to travel. In terms of publications, publishing this work has been incredibly difficult. When I used to publish what I would call safe work, pretty mainstream work, I never had problems with publication. Then I started doing this, and I was like, why I can't even get it past the gatekeeper. I can't get it past the editor. The editor won't even send it out for a review. They reject it right out, saying it's not of no interest to their readers. And so it's been a remarkable journey in the level of challenges at every step.
I can imagine. I mean, I've had some of that myself as a mental health practitioner, speaking out the way I do against all types of drug treatment, etc. It can get it's stunning to a practitioner when you realize that not everybody's really in this to really make change or make things.
No, it's hard. Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to change the course of the Titanic.
Ooh, nice one. Now, can we dive in? You said about 42 minerals tops, I think you mentioned.
In active ingredients. So that would include vitamins and minerals and amino acids.
Is there anything, I mean, besides the basic ones we know we need, we talk B12, etc. Are there some maybe in there that people don't think about, or that, maybe be missing more of, that maybe you're adding more to this, or you see anything like that? Or is anything rare in there that maybe...
We don't think there's a magic ingredient, if that's what you're getting at.
No. I mean, is there, well, we all know about sort of B12, vitamin C. I'm kind of like, walk further into those 42 ingredients that maybe your average person that thinks, taking that daily vitamin fixes, whether it's 1 or 2 or 10. It doesn't have to be. I'm not looking for the magic ingredient. No,
you just want to have a better idea. Like it's got riboflavin, thiamine. These are B vitamins.
That's all,
niacin, vitamin D, which is very important for us to be getting more vitamin D. Because we're so.
Have you seen Dr. Rhonda Patrick's work at Found My Fitness with vitamin D?
I'm not familiar. I don't think so.
Definitely look up Dr. Rhonda Patrick's work on vitamin D. She's linked a lot of that work to gut health and mental health, but not near as far as you all have come. Not at all. She's very on a genetic, biological side. Right.
I mean, a lot of, not to be criticizing other researchers in the field, but I do worry when we get focused on one specific nutrient as being the magic cure.
I get that. Well, because
So
you're fighting that idea that you're selling snake oil. So if the idea
yeah,
is this, right? What I'm really trying to do is, I play dummy sometimes because there's a lot of things I don't know about, and people that listen that know a lot about other things. So some people I try to walk through when they hear 42
yep,
nutrients,
yep,
it
yep.
does.
So
You know what I mean?
other,
What I'm pointing out is there is no magic thing. That's kind of what I'm pointing out is this is a
yeah,
basic culmination of minerals that would
yep,
naturally be
yep.
existing in you.
Exactly. So they're naturally occurring in your food. So some minerals that would be in there would be zinc, potassium, magnesium. Um, there's a small amount, very, very small amount, trace amount of lithium. Other things would be boron, selenium, iodine, vitamin
Amazing. Aren't
E.
we so
Yes,
complex? It's so amazing, that we run on so much fuel, different kind of magical,
absolutely.
fuel. Now, is there any way to eat your way to just that, given our epigenetic influence being so heavy on a lot of people being negative, right? We have a lot of negative energy and stuff. So is there a way to eat the mineral?
Of course. I mean, they're available in our food. So if you were to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables and eating, a healthy, sort of a natural diet that's not full of processed foods, then you would get a lot. You would be getting a lot of these vitamins and minerals. And so the hope is that if we could all shift the way we're eating, then we'd come a long way to changing the way we're feeling. I don't think it's going to completely change it for everyone, but I certainly think it would help a lot of people by simply changing diet. And the number of emails I've had from people over the world, over time and over from around the world, who have just wanted to share their story with me and saying, I changed my diet and I feel so much better. I mean, I hear that all the time. I've changed my diet, I feel so much better. So it's definitely a first place to go, is to be increasing your fruit and vegetable consumption, and be eating a lot more than what we're even 5 a day is probably not adequate for many people. Some people could get away with that, but many people probably couldn't because of genetic differences. So we can definitely get a lot of these just out of our food. But the idea here is that given what we're eating, given that maybe people are more vulnerable, some people are more vulnerable to the depletions of nutrients in food, and given that they may need more, then that's where this approach really fits in.
Yeah, for most people catching up listening to a lot of Julia's work here is dealing directly again with those that are mentally ill or dealing with diagnosis of mental health, whether that's ADHD, etc. We've talked about ADHD a little bit, and is there any major change in something else like a bipolar? Are you seeing seeing a big difference? Are you seeing major changes? Because that's one, I believe it's beginning to be overdiagnosed personally, but I'm one person. I'm not a research person and I'm biased.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep.
but it seems to be affecting many people in ways and ways of treating it. But are you even seeing positive effects from people that are either severely or mildly diagnosed in that area?
Right. So we haven't been able to do trials in New Zealand with bipolar disorder. So and Bonnie was never able to do those types of studies in Canada. One of the challenges of doing a study with bipolar disorder is that you need to find a group of people who aren't taking medications, and that's virtually impossible because that's the cornerstone of use of treatment for bipolar disorder. So no psychiatrist would agree to taking their patients off of medication in order to participate in a research trial. So we're a bit in a catch-22 on being able to do that type of work. And so I've explored it here in New Zealand, and it's really it's one of those trials I'd love to do, but like a proper randomized control trial. But there's too many obstacles to doing that. With ADHD, it's easier because technically Ritalin is something that is in and out of the system. People can't, there's drug holidays. It's not something that there's so much aversion to taking children off of Ritalin in order to participate in our research. Not that we certainly never tell people to come off medications. That's not we don't operate that way. It's when people have made a choice that they can then come into our trial if they've made a choice them independently of us to come and be in our research. So in our studies that we do here in New Zealand, everyone's medication free. And so that does make it very challenging for doing the research that you're describing for bipolar disorder. There have been some what I described was open label trials. That is where you simply take people and you put them on the nutrients, you see if they get better. Those types of trials have been done in the US and Canada. And all of those show that the symptoms of bipolar disorder do get better. I would say one of the first things that we notice getting better in our children, and also in many of the adults that we've treated over the years, is what I would like to call emotional dysregulation. And so it's not dissimilar from bipolar disorder in terms of the symptoms, except bipolar disorders generally would be seen as being more extreme. But we see kids who are so irritable and the temper tantrums and just so dysregulated emotionally, who get completely calmed down on using the nutrients. And it's probably one of the first things that we see get better is that emotional dysregulation. So it would be absolutely fantastic if I could inspire someone out there to try to do a research trial using the nutrients for bipolar disorder, because it needs to be done in order to be able to offer families something alternative to what they currently have.
Yeah, I think because I think my mentor Leo told me, one of the most dangerous diagnoses. A lot of people lean toward the antisocial, borderline, etc. But if you do find someone that is severely diagnosed, which can be very rare, it's a rare disorder, and that is severely diagnosed bipolar and catch them in a manic phase at the same time, it can be dangerous. So it's risky, but there's severity levels. There's edges of that you're able to study. And a lot of people do have dual diagnosis. They do experience both. So the ADHD focus is important because a lot of those pills do damage to kids. It does have them caught up in life, having to take something for the rest of their life or numbing them out. Stephen Tonti was on a while ago who talked about his childhood dealing with that. So have you been able to do depression studies or anxiety studies in dealing with that? Right.
So anxiety studies, the ones that we've conducted here in New Zealand, would be the ones associated with the earthquake. And so that's where we were able to show very simple intervention, giving people nutrients. It's very hard to do a whole bunch of psychotherapy on people, an entire population who are traumatized by the earthquakes. Right. So it's a very simple way of helping a large group of people cope better with the earthquake. So we've shown that. In terms of depression we haven't targeted yet specifically, but although many people who have come into our trials have been depressed. So we've been able to look at that as an independent variable and look to see whether or not depression gets better. And absolutely, yes, it does. But we haven't, if you see what I mean, we've had people with ADHD who are also depressed, right. Or we've had anxious people who are also depressed. But we are currently in the stages of trying to launch a new trial where we're going to be recruiting women who are depressed during pregnancy and see whether or not giving them nutrients can be a viable way to assist them with the symptoms of depression at a time when we know it is not a good idea to take antidepressants because of the known effects that it has on the unborn child. So that's our next study that we want to launch.
I love that approach. Postpartum depression, it's real. People joke about it and talk about it off cliche. Yeah, when your body goes through that kind of transition, it can be serious. And postpartum depression can actually end up hurting the child beyond that because the mother's not present. The mother's not there at times. So it actually, postpartum can relay into the child. So the fact that you're going at that, something that is a little more concrete, almost safer to deal with, it's helping two people at the same time. You're hoping the newborn, the family, and the mother by approaching that.
That's right.
That kind of took my next question, which was what's on the forefront for the research group? Where are you headed? Where are you aiming? That kind of covers that. President, is there anything else kind of that you'd like to work, like the bipolar you mentioned? Is there anything else that you'd like to do studies on and approach this, or maybe just an epiphany, maybe just a scientist bell going off that it may help this, and I want to do it eventually, but?
Yeah. Oh, we have those all the time. And that's led to a lot of studies with my students. So we've noticed, for example, that we've observed that people will report their sleep gets better. And so that's led to 2 trials that we've run looking at the impact of using just nutrients to help people with insomnia. We had, we know people reported to us when they've been in our studies that they've stopped smoking. So that led to a study that's just being finished at the moment. Another PhD student of mine who's been looking to see whether or not they can help people quit smoking through the use of nutrients. So that's what resulted in that study. Other observations are that women tell us that their PMS gets better. So that led to another RCT that another PhD student of mine is running and is going to be completed hopefully early next year. So there's we listen to patients, and so we listen to our participants and what they tell us. So even though we are supposedly targeting one specific symptom like ADHD or the attention, that's actually attention hyperactivity and impulsivity, we're also listening to the stories that families come in with and what other things may improve as a consequence of taking the nutrients or placebo. I mean, at this point, we're always blind in these things, but we listen. And so that often will lead to the next project is what did we observe in the last study? But we're also trying to do something which is to better understand the mechanism of action. So I'm now collaborating with geneticists. So we're collecting the DNA of these participants to see whether or not what you mentioned epigenetic effects. Can we see epigenetic effects happening with the nutrients? Are there changes that are occurring when these people consume the nutrients? So that's something that we're exploring. We've had kids go through fMRI to see whether or not there are changes in their brain function. And again, we're just seeing, can we observe these changes? Is there something going on? It's very exploratory. We don't know what we're looking for, but it's a place to start. And the other area that we're looking at is the gut, is the microbiome. Is there something different about their guts? Is there different in terms of the bacteria? And so we are collecting the types of data that your audience can well imagine in order to better understand that. So we're trying to target, tackle this from many, many different directions, because at the end of the day, for people to pay attention to us, we have to have solid data it's airtight, and we need to run the types of trials that people pay attention to, which is why we run these randomized control trials, because that's the only type of trial medicine will listen to. And we're looking at mechanism of action because that's how that's the types of trials that people want to see as well. If it does work, why does it work?
What are you seeing? I know you're trying to get those studies, but why do you think it works? What are the mechanisms? I mean, you're the smart one that's doing the thing anyway. So I know you're just hypothesizing, or maybe you can't have bias in it, but why do you think it works? What's the mechanism, according to you think?
I suspect it's a combination of things that are going on, especially when you're giving people so many different nutrients. I think it's that we're providing, in a simplistic way, if we think about ourselves as chemical soups, and that all these biochemical reactions are occurring in our bodies all the time, that if you think about the production of the neurotransmitters that are required for optimal brain function, like serotonin or dopamine, in order for our bodies to make these neurotransmitters, they need nutrients. Okay. So they will not be manufactured if your body doesn't have nutrients. So we wonder, and lots of them and different ones. And so we wonder whether or not simply providing the body with the ingredients that it needs in order to then do what it does might be contributing to the positive effects that we see. So that's one idea. We wonder whether or not the mitochondria, which are these little things in every cell that are responsible for the production of energy, whether or not they're depleted, and that we're providing the nutrients that the mitochondria need in order to function optimally.
Whoa. You gotta Jack Cruz. You two gotta join forces on a study, because what you're talking is up this. Wow. If you two join forces, why? Oh no, you guys would probably take over. Oh my word. I just keep going, Julia. I'm sorry, I couldn't keep my mouth shut.
No. So, but also these are not my ideas. So these are
a lot of us. I get it. Yeah.
I'm
right. We build on each other in science.
Yeah. Do we help the body combat inflammation? Are we helping with reduction of inflammation? And so there's a host of different reasons why these approaches might work. And we're just here to try to discover it.
Yeah, I'm writing my second book right now called The Killing Fields: Athletes' Depression.
Okay. Okay.
And I believe that there should be a diagnosis in the DSM called athlete's depression. And when you, I won't go over the whole etiology, but when you raise a human being from 4, 5, 6 years old, certain gladiator method that makes changes from a genetic level to all over the place, and from a mental level, right? And varies. But when an athlete trains, also, I'm talking high performance, etc. We all know they're pumped full of all kinds of vitamins. You're taking this, you're taking that, you're eating like crazy. There's just stuffing the calories down you, right? Because you're burning them. Well, when your body functions for a long period of time at a red line level, if you will, prepared to respond like a cheetah at any moment to do anything, like a high performance athlete, as that starts to go away, well, not only do we begin to lose our identity, who we are, right? What are we, the football player anymore? Are we the rugby player? What do we do? Who are we? So as this begins to happen, our body is also used to running on adrenaline, on pump, on we got to work out today, we got to run, compete, and the food that's coming in is just insane. And then when all this begins to stop, well, what are the effects there? What are the brain effects of the athlete at the end when he's no longer super juicing himself with all the juicers and smoothies and food and calories and supplements and all that? What quick decline happens, and what brain changes and body functions begin to change when a quick injury takes you out from ever playing again, or they cut you, or you're too old, right?
Right. Yeah. I don't know. Good question. But I guess if you've been feeding yourself all those nutrients and it's been doing you good, and you stop it, I can see that you go into a pretty quick decline.
Right. I see, because we would max out. It's like take 1,000,000 vitamins, right? You'll get rid of the rest. So you're always maxing out on almost everything.
Well, we have to be careful, though. I mean, I would just put a caveat on that one, is that everything is toxic at a certain dose. And so you do need to be very aware of what's called an upper limit of consumption of any nutrient over a daily basis. And so those have been fairly well established. And so we are careful about making sure that we're not taking things in toxic levels. And so, we do need to be careful. We do need to be mindful of that, and not just take enormous amounts of, I mean, personally, I think taking enormous amounts of any one nutrient on its own, it would be detrimental to your health, because you're not taking it in consumption with all the other nutrients that your body needs to that particular nutrient works with. So, zinc and copper is a good example, is that you should never consume zinc without taking a sort of a balanced ratio with copper, because they work together.
Well, I appreciate you bringing me back to earth in the safe place of talk,
Right.
of protecting us, or covering our butts there. But for the moment, what I meant is, being an athlete myself like that, it seemed like I was always taking another electrolyte or another pill or another something right after this game or before this game. And that's what I meant. It feels like they're running you on basically full of everything, all the time. And it becomes a sharp decline in that. So I'm sorry I squirreled us off there at the end.
No, that's okay.
If you could make an announcement, if you will, coming from that research lab, really, and you could hold up the big red sign that, people are avoiding you with, right? They're avoiding listening or publishing these articles. Now you're still written all over the place, but
yeah, we've managed to overcome a lot of those challenges despite them. But that's been a lot of hard work, and a lot of times where I've thought, why in the world am I doing this? Is it time to give up? And as soon as we get through one obstacle, another one comes down crashing down. So
what keeps you going?
What keeps me going is the families. It's the families and the people that we help. That's what keeps me going, is that I think that we're onto something. And so for me to walk away would be for me to be turning my back on all of those people who need our help. And so that's what keeps me going.
Short and sweet. The information rampage came for a straight hour. So I'm gonna leave it with that. That's a heartfelt rampage. There was nothing but honesty to that. No sell there, Julia. So I appreciate the work you're doing. I know those families do. As somebody that's just in awe of anybody that steps outside of the norm of what they're supposed to do, questions what they're supposed to do, what they've been taught to do, finds new ways, pushes new avenues, questions everything, including themselves. I mean, this is the definition of living a cognitive rampage. And Julia, you do that, and I
All
appreciate
right.
that. Your rampage is saving and changing lives. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Nice to be on the show.
And welcome back anytime. If you get some new stuff that comes out, real hardcore mental health related, like you're doing, everything is. I mean, the postpartum, I love to talk about if you get there. Any new research about ADHD and that, if you'd
Yeah.
like to please bring back, I would love to help you share it and
Yeah.
tell the world.
Yeah. Well, we always post it on our Facebook page, anything new that's happening. So people can follow that. And I'm just even trying to remember what it's called. I think we now call it Julia Rucklidge something or other.
Julia Rucklidge Mental Health and Nutrition Group.
That's the one. Yes.
Yeah.
So, or I tweet if we had a really big, if we've published anything, I will tweet it, and my handle is at Julia Rucklidge.
All right, everybody reach out too. If you've tried the nutrients and you're dealing with mental health and you've seen some effects, etc., and whatever your story is it okay if they reach out to you, tell you what their story's been, their experience, maybe find their way to new?
Yeah, no, I'm always happy to hear from people. I get a lot of emails, so I'll often just give a one-liner response, but I do, at least when people want to know what nutrients we've been studying, I'm always happy to share that information. So people can email me, julia.ruckledge@canterbury.ac.nz, and I will reply in due course.
Oh, I appreciate it. And thanks again for the beginning and working through all that with us. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Okay.
Keep changing the world, Julia. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks.